Amberlight Caverns. Tonight we'll walk through a network of crystal tunnels that give off their own soft glow. The stone here is warm to the touch, and the light seems to rise from inside it, turning the passages into a quiet world of amber and honey. At the entrance, the ground slopes down under a smooth arch of rock the color of toasted sugar. The threshold is worn by many careful footsteps, and the shape of those steps has polished the stone to a matte sheen. A faint breeze moves outward, carrying the scent of damp mineral and something like clay after rain. Where the walls curve, hairline veins shine as if a candle smoulders inside them. You place your fingers on the nearest seam and feel a gentle warmth. Not hot, just steady, like a hand warmer tucked in a pocket. Water beads along the seam's edge and gathers into a clear droplet that trembles before it falls. The droplet lands on a darker patch of floor, and the sound is a quick tick, neat and precise. Ahead, the tunnel bends left, and the bend throws back light in layers, brighter at the core and fading to tea-colored shadow at the edges. A cotton rope guides along the wall, threaded through brass rings sunk deep into the stone. The rope is clean and dry, and the brass is cool where your thumb glides over it. The first chamber opens like a hollow inside a walnut, round and close, and quietly luminous. Crystals rise from the floor in hexagonal columns, their faces satin smooth and only faintly ridged. Each column glows from within, the color deepening near the base and paling near the tips where the facets split the light. Inclusions inside the crystal look like thin trails of smoke or tiny fern fronds caught mid-unfolding. When you rest your palm flat on one column, the warmth is firmer here, as if the stone holds a small stored day. Moisture clings to your knuckles and prints an oval on the surface before it vanishes. The air is still, and your breath hangs briefly, pale and even, then melts into the amber around you. On the floor, a fan of fine silt shows the wakes of slow water that must pass through after storms. Small brass markers, numbered in tidy script, sit at the edges, so guides can count visitors without speaking. The silence is not empty. It is simply full of very soft sounds. Those sounds sort themselves as you listen. A drip from somewhere above hits a crystal lip and changes into a bell-like ting. Another drip falls straight to the floor and makes that same neat tick you heard at the threshold. Farther off, water runs in a narrow chute, whispering around a corner where the stone tightens into a funnel. Air slips through a fissure, like someone drawing in a thin thread, steady, unhurried. Now and then the cave gives a breath of its own, a mild exhale that brushes your cheek and moves a loose hair. Your boot sole shifts a grain of grit and answers back with a small crunch. The rope creaks lightly in its ring when you turn. It is a music of single notes, spaced well apart. No one hurries the notes here, and they don't crowd each other. The pathway continues on a boardwalk set an inch above the natural floor. The planks are pale, with a narrow groove cut down their center to guide any stray water. At each step, the wood returns a soft knock that stays in your feet more than your ears. Low rails keep you from brushing the crystals with your coat. Plaques the size of your palm tell you the names of formations. Candlefield, Vale Steps, Glass Orchard. The letters are engraved and darkened with something that will not rub off. A small toolbox sits tucked under the rail where a caretaker left it, lid closed, metal corners rounded by use. There is a roll of cotton cloth and a tin of beeswax inside for the rails, and a screw jar rattles when the boardwalk flexes. Everything has a place that makes sense. Everything is quiet and ready for the next hand that needs it. In a side alcove, two caretakers are tidying the morning's condensation from a viewing window that looks into a seam. Their movements are slow and economical, wiping in overlapping circles with lint-free pads. One holds a battery lantern for the other, the light angled to show smears before they dry. A coil of hose lies at their boots, not draped across the path, but looped and set aside, tidy as a sleeping snake. The older caretaker tests the window edges with 3 fingers, feeling for air that might invite dust. The younger one clears a tiny blocked drain hole with a thin wire, and a bead of water threads through, then drops with a relieved plink. They do not speak because they don't need to. They work like a practiced pair. When you pass, they nod once with small smiles that read as welcome and patience. In their lantern light, the seam behind the glass blooms a little brighter and then calms. You walk on with the steady pace they seem to approve of. The next chamber is narrower, and here water has scored the stone into fine ribs. A line of small stalactites hangs along one edge, like the teeth of a comb. Every few moments, a drop gathers at the point of a tooth and lets go, landing on a matching stalagmite in a shallow dish. The dish rings at a slightly different pitch each time, depending on where the drop strikes. A row of dishes, a row of tings, each not quite the same, spreads the sound like delicate cutlery. The glow in this chamber is softer, more apricot than amber, and the ribs on the wall catch it like the inside of a seashell. Touching the wall here warms your fingertips more quickly. The ribs conduct heat from deeper in the rock. If you lean close, you can see tiny crystal needles pointing outward, too small to catch a sleeve. Even the air feels fine textured, as if it had passed through a sieve. Your breath slows to fit the room. Beyond the ribs, a stream crosses the path in a clear, shallow trench. The builders placed flat stone stepping pads just under the water's skin, and the flow breaks around them in curved sheets. Blind fish drift here, their bodies pale, with eyes like pearly beads sealed under skin. They ride the steady current without fighting it, tipping their tails only when the flow pushes them towards the wall. A crayfish the size of your hand scuttles from shadow to shadow, antennae exploring the way before its claws commit. On the stream bed, pebbles are arranged by weight. The heaviest are smooth, and sit unmoved in the middle. The lighter ones feather out towards the banks. Light from the walls reaches the water and reflects back in wavering bands that climb the ceiling. A low bridge of copper slats carries the boardwalk over the trench, and the slats are spaced so the water can speak. As you step across, the fish adjust smoothly and continue on. The water goes where it must go, and it takes exactly as much time as it needs. A smaller tunnel leads into a room the caretakers call the lantern shelf. Here, the ceiling slopes low, and the floor steps up in shallow terraces. Each terrace edged with a short crystal lip. Thin curtains hang from the ceiling, like glass leaves, layered, translucent, and strong. When a drop falls on one of these curtains, the whole sheet answers with a soft, spread-out chime. The chime travels along the edge and fades into the warm mass of the wall. A moth with cream wings rests on a curtain's surface, its body quiet, its wings tilted like an open book. Cave crickets cling to a high corner, legs angled and tidy, not moving, part of the room's logic. On the middle terrace, a salamander stands with toes splayed, skin glossy, eyes round and unblinking. It tests the dampness with the tip of its face, then turns and eases under the lip, leaving the terrace exactly the way it found it. Your sleeve grazes a curtain by accident, and it sings a low note you feel in your wrist bones. The room accepts this and keeps breathing. Where the tunnel narrows again, the walls are dark, almost brown, veined with lighter strings that ladder upward. A plaque explains that ancient seas left these lines, and when the rock folded itself, the lines folded too. Pressed into the wall are faint shells, spiraled and neat, smaller than fingernails. You run a finger over one and find it is raised, not carved. The creature once lived in the mud that became this ceiling. Near the floor, Someone long before you scratched a date into a softer patch. Careful letters, careful numbers. A neat hand that lifted at the end of each stroke. A newer tag sits several feet away, tiny and removable, used by the current survey and approved by the caretakers. The room holds both marks without fuss. The long ago and the present, standing side by side. Warmth from the stone seems steadier here, like coals banked under ash. The rope dips around a spur of rock and then rises again, and your palm learns its rhythm. You come away with the faint scent of cotton. Past the fossil wall, a short stair leads to a lookout carved into a corner. 2 benches curve along the stone, their seats shallow and smooth. Backs low so shoulders can relax. A visitor has left a small sketchbook on the bench, secured with an elastic band. The book is open to a pencil drawing of the chamber below. The stream, the stepping pads, the lantern sheen on water. The lines are light and precise, built up in patient layers. A stub of graphite lies beside the book, worn at one end from careful hands. On the other bench is a folded map printed on waterproof paper, edges rounded, labels clear and modest. The caretakers have marked tiny crosses where a rail was adjusted, where a seep appeared, where a curtain's pitch lowered by a note. You sit for a moment and match cross to corner until the map and the cave feel like the same object. Then you set the book back exactly as you found it. The next passage breathes cool air that smells faintly metallic, like a coin warmed in a pocket. The ceiling dips and then lifts, and in the low part, mica dust glitters in the amber, like grain caught in sunlight. Your headlamp stays off. It is not needed here, but you keep your hand near the switch, in case the cave decides to darken. The floor here is solid crystal, and your step makes a quiet, glassy knock that disappears as soon as you lift your foot. The rope is replaced for a few yards by a rail where the wall slants away. The rail wrapped in soft tape that does not slip. A single lantern, mounted at ankle height, marks the start of a tight turn. Set down low, so light does not escape up to the bats' lane. You do not see bats yet, but the caretakers think ahead for times when they pass. A breath of warmer air rises through the turn and carries a trace of earth, not rock, which means a root somewhere above. You put a hand on the wall, and the warmth answers more quickly. In the next few steps, the world opens again. The grand hollow takes its time to reveal itself. First, you notice the way the glow deepens and divides into layers. One amber, one more golden, one almost clear. Then the ceiling moves upward, higher and higher, until it simply becomes distance. A lake rests in the center, surface flat, with only the tiniest texture where a spring feeds from below. The water mirrors the ceiling's scattered lights, pulling them into long wavy shapes that converge at your feet. On the far bank, a small skiff is tied to an iron ring, oars secured with cloth, so wood will not clap against wood. Two cousins from the town above use that skiff sometimes, the plaque says, to chart the shore and check that the rope lines stay at the right slack. They write down the water's edge each week, and the difference tells them what the season has been doing outside. A lantern on the skiff's prow is turned inward toward the seat, not outward toward the lake. The boat waits without leaning or tapping. The lake holds it level. You follow a ledge that wraps the lake, never far from the wall. Underfoot, crystals of different sizes make a quiet mosaic. Some are as broad as a palm, some as small as grains, all set flush so they do not catch a toe. Here and there the caretakers have mended a chip with clear resin to keep the geometry whole. The resin reads as water trapped forever, and your mind accepts it at once. On one part of the ledge, the wall bulges inward and forms a short tunnel the caretakers call the organ slot. Inside, tall crystals stand shoulder to shoulder like pipes. If you touch them with an open hand, each speaks a tone so low, it is more like a pressure than a sound. The tones overlap in a pleasant way. never clashing, as if they agreed on a scale long ago. You stop touching, and the pressure fades back into the room. When you exit the slot, the lake seems flatter than before, the surface even more determined to be level. Past the organ slot, a shelf of crystals spreads in thin plates, like a stack of clear leaves. They are strong underfoot, but the caretakers ask you to step on the thicker parts, and markers show where to place each foot. Under the plates, small pockets of warmer air rise, and you feel them on your ankles as you pass. In the pockets live tiny, pale amphipods that scatter when your shadow crosses them. They fold themselves into commas and then unfold and hurry to another crease. The plates themselves hold faint stripes of color: honey, straw, smoke, stacked in lines that match the growth of the crystal. When the spring beneath the lake is extra busy, water seeps over this shelf and leaves the thinnest film. The film gathers dust from the air, and the caretakers rinse it away with a can of lake water and a brush with silk bristles. The brush makes no sound you can hear, but you can see the surface brighten. You take each marked step and keep going. A short passage brings you to a chamber where the roof is low and dotted with tiny stalactites like pencil tips. Here, the cave's warmth is at its kindest, even on the back of your neck. The caretakers have hung a thermometer that settles at a number they could tell you without looking. A thin steam feather rises from a crack in the wall, where deeper heat meets a cold seam, and the feather disappears a hand's breadth above the crack. On the floor are small white pellets, seeds carried down from above by a root channel, dried and light. A lone sprout stands in a pocket of silt no bigger than a spoon. 2 leaves flat and confident. It has found what it needs and takes no more. An isopod trundles by like a tiny armoured truck, working around the sprout's base and leaving tidy crumbs in its path. The rail is wrapped in leather here, softer, so warm hands don't lose heat. You move on when you are ready, not because the room asks you to. One last gallery waits near the end of the loop, and it carries the Caverns name. Amberlight Gallery is long and straight, with walls that breathe light like steady lungs. The crystal here is cleaner, with fewer inclusions, so the glow is even, without flecks. The floor gently tilts upward, and as you climb, the warmth drops to a steady mildness that keeps your skin at ease. In the middle of the gallery, a panel of crystal stands upright, clear enough to see your soft outline reflected inside it. Your reflection seems to live within the stone, rather than on its surface, shaped by the amber instead of bouncing off it. You try a slow wave, and the figure answers with the same pace, not delayed, not hurried. At the top of the tilt, a bench is cut directly from the wall and skimmed smooth. A tin cup sits upside down on a peg here, clean, used only for demonstrations when school groups visit and the spring line is high. Today it is dry, and it makes a light clink when a small current of air lifts it and sets it back. The path bends toward the exit, and the glow starts to thin out into dusk. The rope is a shade cooler, and your palm misses the faint heat without making a fuss about it. The air smells closer to the surface now. More soil, a slip of leaf, a whisper of cedar from a forest you can't yet see. A droplet from above lands on the back of your hand, warmer than you expect after so long underground. A caretaker's broom leans against the wall in a notch, bristles resting on a small mat so they will dry square. There's a chalkboard nearby with a simple list. Count rails, check rings, wipe glass, oil hinges, sweep leaves. A tiny sketch of a fish is in the corner of the board, drawn with quick lines, and someone has added a small smile to it. The board makes the cave's care visible, a quiet promise that the warmth and the order will be here next time. You take 3 more steps, and the amber dims behind you like a candle under a lid.